It could be worse. Everything will be fine. Look on the bright side. When facing a hard time, whether it be a bad grade on a test, a fight with a friend, tough news about a family member, or really any kind of difficulty, we've all been on the receiving end of this kind of advice. Maybe you can think about a time when someone has come to you to share their own bad news, and you've said something like, "What are you so upset about? So many other people have it worse than you." Or, "You should just be grateful that you even got to know your grandma. Mine died when I was little, and I don't even remember her." Now, I think we often have good intentions when we say these kinds of things. When something goes wrong, especially something relatively small in the grand scheme of things, stepping back to get a little bit of perspective can be helpful. And psychologists have discovered, through studies and all the work that they do, that cultivating a positive mindset can be a powerful coping mechanism when we're faced with difficult circumstances. In the classroom or on the playing field, you've probably heard your teachers or coaches talk about the benefits of a growth mindset, learning to see failure or challenge or setbacks as springboards for persistence and grit and higher achievement. All good things. But there's a point at which all this encouragement to think positively and to look on the bright side can be problematic and even harmful or toxic. And that's what I want to talk about today. I came across an analogy that illustrates the problem of toxic positivity really well. So imagine with me for a second that you're in your dorm room and you decide you're hungry for the ice cream you've been keeping in the common room freezer. It's been a tough day. You need some time to relax, watch some Netflix, and just have a treat. So you get that ice cream, you take that first bite, and it tastes really good after your tough day. And then you finish it up, head down the hallway to wash out your bowl. But on your way to washing out your bowl, somebody else on your hall gets your ice cream out of the freezer, scoops 6 more scoops out, puts them on your bowl, and forces you to sit down and eat all of them, even though you didn't even want any more. And now, what had tasted so good just a few minutes ago has made you feel sick. And you're feeling a lot worse than you did just a little bit ago. When we tell someone that it could be worse, or to look on the bright side, or to just be grateful, what we're doing is force-feeding them all of that additional ice cream. We're telling them that the best way, and sometimes even the only way, to cope with something bad is to put a positive spin on it, to not dwell on the negative. And when we do that, we're telling them that their sadness, their loss, their fear, their frustration, whatever pain they're feeling, just doesn't matter. In my Good and Evil class a few weeks ago, we were working our way through the book of Job, a classic exploration on the meaning and purpose of suffering and God's role in all of it. And a couple themes came up. We all acknowledged that we're looking for comfort when we're suffering. We want to know that it won't be permanent. We want to know how we can live in the midst of the many challenges that life brings. But how do we do that in a way that makes space for, in a way that honors our negative emotions? For me, I've often turned to the practices of my own faith tradition. I've always been moved by the book of Psalms in the Bible, a collection of prayers spoken by Jews and Christians throughout the centuries. There's a particular psalm, number 22, that opens with these words: my God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from helping me, from the words of my groaning? God, I cry by day, but you do not answer, and by night, but I find no rest." In the account of Jesus' crucifixion in the New Testament, these very same words from Psalm 22 came from his own mouth while he was being executed. Across these ancient prayers, we hear people crying out to God in the midst of despair, which suggests to me that lament and despair and anger have been vital, have been seen as healthy, have been seen as necessary in our own human journeys. It's noteworthy, right, that nobody told Jesus that he should stop being so upset. Nobody told the writers of these ancient psalms that it could be worse. But instead, there was space for their genuine expression of honest pain, of anger, without jumping too quickly from loss to acceptance. The importance of accepting lament and rejecting toxic positivity is not an idea unique to Jewish and Christian traditions. The first of the Four Noble Truths in Buddhism teaches that life is suffering. As my students have heard me say, this doesn't mean that every moment of life is difficult or miserable or painful, but it does mean that the very fact of human existence, simply by being born, by existing, by being human, we will encounter pain and grief and loss. We will be confronted by things that don't make sense to us, that we just don't understand. And Buddhist wisdom teaches us that that's not because we lack optimism or positive thinking. Instead, the problem is that when we try to pretend that nothing is wrong, when we hide from the pain, when we deny the truth of what's happening. Many hard realities have been exposed by the COVID-19 pandemic, both in this country and around the world. In addition to the countless personal challenges we've all faced, at a societal level, we've seen hundreds of thousands of deaths. We've seen the frailty of so many of our systems and institutions. We've seen dire situations like illness, homelessness, disparities in access to healthcare and education, food insecurity, unemployment, and racial justice. These things have always existed, but many of us have been insulated from them due to our privilege. But regardless of privilege, it's become abundantly clear that no one can good vibes only their way out of a global pandemic. And similarly, no one can good vibes only their way out of a cancer diagnosis or a panic attack, or a broken leg, or depression, or the death of a loved one, or centuries of systematic racism. And when we tell people that they can, when we tell people that what's wrong with them is their attitude or their lack of positive thinking, we're blaming them for their problems and making them feel worse. I've often wondered what my own kids, ages 7 and 4, will remember when they look back on these strange pandemic years. I certainly hope they'll remember our morning dance parties to party in the USA when we were stuck at home during the spring of 2020. I hope they'll remember our weekend hikes and bike rides and their triumphant return to their newly vaccinated grandparents' house. But I also know that when they look back on these years, they will probably also remember a lot of change, a lot of difficulty, a lot of frustration, a lot of fear, a lot of loss. And while part of me wants to protect them from those things like none other, in my heart of hearts, I know that it's not actually bad for them to remember those things too. And partly because the months since March of 2020 have been characterized by a lot of tough stuff, change and difficulty and frustration and fear. That's just the truth. And no amount of good vibes can change all of those hard things. I believe we can go through hard things, we certainly have been, and not be undone by them. I believe we can face the darkness around us and eventually find some light again. But that's only possible when what first happens is honestly and openly admitting that things are dark, without someone immediately chiming in to tell us that we should look on the bright side. Jesus once said that it is the truth that will set us free. Well, the truth is, sometimes things just aren't okay. I hope that you can find freedom in this truth. And I hope that in place of toxic positivity, we can work to respond to one another with acceptance, validation, compassion, and empathy, making this community a safer and healthier place for all. Thank you.